And now, the general weather around Alaska.
Hello and welcome to this Saturday edition of the Alaska Weather Show. Today is June 8th, 2024, and I am meteorologist Carrie Haisley. Before we dive in, there are a few ways highlighted on the screen here that you can get a hold of us if you are looking for weather information. First, the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-855-937-4977. That takes you to a menu system, and then you can go through a selection and get a local forecast for your area. You can also check us out on the web anytime at weather.gov/Alaska. And always, I love to hear from you, so you can reach out to me via email. My address there on the screen is carrie.haisley@noaa.gov. Now, I do have one quick program change notice that I would like to highlight for everyone. As we go through the weekend here, we're not going to be able to produce all of the products we normally do for our YouTube broadcasts. We have some limited resources, and I'm really sorry for the inconvenience with that. Our aviation and our marine weather broadcasts will not be posted to YouTube this weekend or next weekend, and not all of our graphics are going to be available either. Some of the aviation, the marine graphics will not be posted to the web. We will keep doing the surface charts. We will keep doing this general weather segment, and normal production will resume on weekdays, and we really appreciate your understanding as we work through this period of limited resources. Now a quick look at weather warnings across the state. We do have a large area under a fire weather warning right now, a red flag warning. That's what's highlighted there in red across your screen, which includes the communities of McGrath, Galena, Fairbanks, Fort Yukon, Eagle, Northway. All of you guys are in this area here where there are enhanced conditions that could create some dangerous fire weather potential. So it's been warm, there's some wind in here, and so we are looking for the potential for some new fire starts through the weekend. The red flag warning is currently in effect through 9 p.m. on Sunday. Good news, when we get into the earlier part of the week, it should get a little wetter, and hopefully these conditions will improve. Up along the north slope, the area highlighted in blue, that is a special weather statement for the potential for ice jam and snowmelt flooding in our rivers and streams north of the Brooks Range. And then we are seeing some snowmelt flooding occurring right now along the Sag River up along the north coast. And that is why we have a flood advisory in effect. It's a little sliver there in the screen, but highlighted there in orange. If we go further down south, we also have a couple of products in effect in the southern part of the state. For Kodiak Island, that's a big one we want to hit on. There is a flood watch in effect. This one goes through late on Sunday. As we go through the next couple of days, it's going to be really wet in this part of the state. In fact, Kodiak is expecting between 3 and 6 inches of rain between today and tomorrow. So flooding potential in low-lying areas, and then also small streams, rivers, any place where we tend to have water pool. Those are places we're definitely going to want to keep an eye out there. Now, taking a look at our fire danger, first we're going to look at grass, and we do see a wide area where the grass is dry enough that it creates a very high fire danger. That's all highlighted there in orange. Even some red extreme showing up with the grasses right now. And then as far as the spruce, which we actually pay a bit more attention to this time of year, very high for some areas around Fort Yukon, even some extremes around Fort Yukon. And that large area highlighted there in yellow, that's high. So this is the area that we're really keying in on for that red flag warning that we showed you just a second ago. Now into the weather. What's going on? We have a low pressure across the northern Pacific, multiple centers of this area of low pressure that's going to be sending multiple fronts up towards the southern part of mainland Alaska as we go through the coming days. We have high pressure in effect up over the Arctic coast, so it's actually pretty dry up that way, actually pretty cloud-free across a lot of the interior today. On satellite, we see clear skies across much of the upper Yukon Valley and even the Arctic coast. Most of the clouds are going to be down in the southern part of the state. And with that, we are seeing precipitation work its way in. We see an onshore flow over Kodiak Island, and the rain is already starting in that area. As we go through the overnight hours, these areas of low pressure all kind of rotating around one another will keep working their way further north, and we see the rain potential increase across South Central and across the Gulf Coast, also across the Bristol Bay area. And we do see some clouds work their way into the western part of the state. We stay clear, we stay pretty dry over the interior and up along the Arctic coast as we go through the overnight hours. Clouds move into the Panhandle, although we should stay dry tonight down that way. Now with the day on Sunday, we see the area of low pressure get a little bit stronger. Doesn't move a lot, but we see a new frontal boundary associated with it push its way towards the southern part of mainland. We do get wet down over the Panhandle now as we get into the day on Sunday. Also, we see some rain work its way potentially into the Anchorage Bowl, the Cook Inlet area, and all along the Gulf Coast, Bristol Bay area too, also going to be very wet. Onshore flow there in Kodiak Island is going to bring rain. Rain could be heavy at times. times. And then if we go further north, we continue to see clear skies across parts of the interior, still stays dry, and so we keep those red flag potential conditions in the day on Sunday across the interior. For Monday, the area of low pressure doesn't move a lot. The frontal boundary does, though. We see that finally push its way into the panhandle. Greatest chance for at least widespread rain is going to be on Monday for southeast Alaska. We also see more rain push its way into south central Alaska. You do see some blue on the map there that highlights snow. This is at higher elevations. We are not expecting snow at low elevation, just up in the mountains there. One thing of note, this is going to be good news for Monday. We see rain work its way into the interior, at least the southern part of the interior, which should dampen some of those fire weather potential conditions. High pressure persists up over the Arctic slope, also out along the western Aleutians. Now, I mentioned we're not going to have an aviation recording today, but I did want to hit on just some of the aviation weather concerns. So with low pressure down over the southern part of our mainland and then down over the North Pacific, the lowest flying weather conditions are going to stay primarily in the southern part of the state, where we do see IFR potential in places like Kodiak and also along the eastern Kenai Peninsula. Widespread marginal VFR by Sunday afternoon along the Gulf Coast, creeping its way into the Panhandle. We also keep low flying conditions out along the Aleutians. Some potential when we see high pressure up over the Arctic slope to bring in stratus up along the Arctic coast there, which would take us down to marginal VFR. Now for Monday, the IFR does seem to back off as that area of low pressure kind of weakens. We'll see more of a widespread marginal VFR setup for the day on Monday down over the Panhandle. That's going to persist though over Kodiak Island, the Gulf Coast certainly as well. Good news though is most of mainland Alaska looks good for flying on Monday. One look at icing. This is for your day on Sunday. We are looking for some considerable moderate ice in the places where the precipitation is going to be most prevalent. Over Kodiak, down over the southern part of Cook Inlet, a lot of the Kenai Peninsula and the Gulf Coast are where we're really looking for the greatest potential for icing. Though really anywhere we're getting precipitation during the day on Sunday has some potential. Good news though is that's going to be fairly elevated, up above about 6,000 feet is kind of the base for where we're likely to see that. Now, with all of these systems moving in addition to seeing low conditions and rain, we're also seeing wind. So what you're looking at on the screen here, this is surface winds. We're going to be looking tonight for very strong surface winds over the terrain along the eastern Kenai Peninsula and then down around Kodiak Island and some of the gaps there as well. We'll also see some pretty strong wind out along the Alaska and the Aleutian ranges. That's going to linger as we get into the day on Sunday. Continue to see that onshore flow very strong, working its way more into Kodiak City as we get into Sunday afternoon, and we'll see some pretty strong winds along the Gulf Coast and eastern Kenai Peninsula as well. Translating that into what that means for flying weather for the day on Sunday, lots of areas of considerable moderate with some very gusty winds out along the Aleutians. The greatest area of note, despite having some pretty active winds, is going to be down along the Gulf Coast, going to be over Kodiak Island. Some potential for some isolated severe highlighted in red from Kodiak City up around the eastern Kenai Peninsula and down around Prince William Sound. We're also going to look for some pretty strong winds up along the Arctic coast that could also bring in considerable moderate turbulence for folks flying up that way. Now on to temperatures. So we'll start with a look at what our low temperatures are going to be when we get up tomorrow morning. Widespread temperatures hovering right around 50 across most of southern Alaska, also into the interior there. Once we get into the day on Sunday afternoon, the northern Mat-Su, you could warm up into right around 70. Interior, we're certainly going to see some 70s, but along the coast with all that rain moving in, clouds moving in, we're likely to stay in the 50s in most places. Panhandle, Juneau, you may get up to 60, but with clouds working in, those 50s are likely to stick around. Now for Monday morning, we continue to see 40s and 50s across the southern part of the state for our lows. Not quite as warm when we get into Monday afternoon. Mat-Su, you guys only get up into the low 60s, and it's going to be hard to break 60 in a lot of places here. Panhandle's going to stay in the 50s with rain coming in. We do see, though, those temperatures that are a bit warmer linger on the other side of the Alaska range. Now let's look out west. So Sunday morning, again, a lot of 40s and 50s. This is really pretty normal for this time of year for those overnight lows. And then out along the Aleutians, Sunday afternoon, temperatures primarily in the 40s. Southwest Alaska, you should get up into the 50s. And then once you get further inland, as you can see that red on the map, it does get pretty warm during the day on Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, not a lot of change. Widespread 40s, 50s, even some 30s out along the Aleutians. And then when we get into the day on Monday, we keep the 40s along the Aleutians, 50s along a lot of the coastal coastal areas, it does get a bit warmer as you get closer into the interior. Now for temperatures, let's go up north. Sunday morning, below freezing along the Arctic coast. That happens when you get high pressure set in, especially if we don't have stratus really kind of take hold there. It kind of lets a lot of the heat get out during the day. And then through the interior, we'll look for overnight lows to be in the 50s. Now, when we get into Sunday afternoon, 80s on the map for Fairbanks, 84. It's going to be a toasty day. And then we continue to see red flag potential because of all of this heat. So a lot of 70s and 80s in the interior. Arctic coast, though, if that stratus sets in, it's going to be hard to get above freezing. We should do it, but it's only going to be in the 30s up along the coast on Sunday. Drops below freezing again overnight up along the Arctic coast. See some 20s up there with 50s in the interior. And then for Monday afternoon, not quite as warm as Sunday as we see some more clouds work their way in, especially in the southern part of the interior, but there are a lot of 70s on the map. And then up along the Arctic coast, we should get back above freezing, albeit just a little bit, for Monday afternoon. Now, a quick look at the sea ice edge. We are looking at our sea ice continue to retreat slowly, so it is that season where we should start to see some open water along the Arctic coast. We do have ice holding on pretty steadily, though, from Utqiagvik over towards the Alaska-Canadian border. And then from Utqiagvik southwest, we are starting to see some ice, but still at the 80% concentration level, and then ice still through the Bering Strait. Once you get south, though, of St. Lawrence Island, for the most part, we're starting to see ice-free conditions. And I know we don't have the full marine forecast video coming up, but I did want to at least highlight some marine conditions here. For the day on Sunday, the highest winds and the highest waves are going to be over the Gulf of Alaska, where we see the most active weather. With that low pressure system in the North Pacific working its way towards southern mainland, we could see some seas get as high as 13 feet just offshore from Kodiak Island, and then some of those winds offshore in the 30-knot range. Also an area of pretty strong winds out over parts of the Bering Sea. Winds there primarily out of the north, and we could see seas across the central Bering up to about 10 feet. And for the day on Monday, we do see some improvement, at least with the winds over the Gulf of Alaska, but that's still going to be the place where we're looking for the worst conditions. Again, that's where the most active weather is. Some seas up as high as 12 feet in the central part of the Gulf. Some improvement out over the Bering Sea, though. We see the winds come down just a little bit. They stay out of the north, but we do see seas come down to somewhere between 8 and 10 feet for the strongest there. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you tuning in. I'm very sorry we don't have all of our videos, that we don't have all of our graphics for you, and I'm sorry I'm not in the studio. I know this just isn't quite the same. It's giving me 2020 flashbacks. Maybe it is to you as well. I'll be back tomorrow, though, and we will go through this same setup, and we'll be back to normal and in the studio on Monday.